This is part 3 of the Tide Bottle project. By the end of part 2, we'd completed the boundary for the main shape of the bottle, the recessed label area, and a step that joins the recessed label and the main bottle. For this video, we are going to build a boundary for the right side of the handle surface, a boundary for the left side of the handle surface, a fill surface for the lower portion of the handle, and a fill surface for the upper portion of the handle. We will then knit all those surfaces together, and we'll add a fillet to this circular edge, and then we will try to add a fillet on this edge of the label surface, but we are probably going to have some trouble doing that because this surface becomes very flat in this area and it won't want to fillet in this zone. So we will do a little trick where we will remove a little bit of our surface here, add a fillet, and patch it back in. We'll reknit everything together again, and that will leave us with all of the surface features to create one half of a bottle. This will take 26 or so steps to accomplish. So now what I'm going to do is roll back to where we were when we left off on the last video. Turning on my sketches, I see all my layout sketches here. What I need to do is create 4 different planes in order to build the surfaces of the handle. These planes are going to be tilted at some odd angles, so what I want to do is create a sketch that will control the location and orientation of those planes. So I'll roll forward to show you what my sketch looked like that did that. When I drew my handle layout sketch, I just drew this as 2 lines. One is an offset arc, and the other is a spline that starts at the top of the arc, curves back down to the bottom of that arc. You may have drawn this in 4 pieces with 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. In either event, you need to have 4 lines total. Where any arcs join together, such as here and here, that's where you want your lines to go. So I'm going to have a plane right through here where these 2 curves join, a plane right through here where these 2 join here, and then in my case these 2 are located in arbitrary locations to split this upper area and lower area from this outer area. But if you have an arc that joins to this arc, then you want to put your line right where that join is here, and this line where you would have a join down here. You can see that I haven't added any dimensions to any of these lines. It might be a good idea, that way you can have a precise angle control on each of these, but for now I'm just eyeballing it. I'm going to close this sketch now. And the way I'm going to create the 4 planes using this sketch is to simply go to my reference geometry for planes. And the first thing I will choose is my front plane, and I'll start with this line here. And what that's going to do is default to making a line perpendicular to the front plane going through that sketch element. Do the same with the next plane. Again, go to reference geometry plane, choose my front plane, and now this sketch element, and that makes a plane perpendicular to the front plane and passing through that element. And we do the same for these last 2 lines as well. So this takes a total of 5 steps to complete. 1 step for this sketch that controls the orientation of the planes, and 1 step for each of the planes that's actually created. Another way you could do this, if you want to be a little lazy about it, is just create this sketch and then just go ahead to your surfaces and extrude those lines. And it doesn't really matter how far you extrude them. Now what you've got are 4 flat surfaces, and you can use these as sketch planes instead. And it doesn't even matter if they're too small to contain the sketch that you want to put on there. Once you select the flat surface as your sketch plane, you can draw the sketches as large as you want. Once you are done using these surfaces, you can then delete them by going up to your surface bodies and just selecting all of them, right-clicking and saying delete bodies, and that gets rid of them, cleaning up your model. Now, I only recommend using this trick if you plan on using these extruded surfaces for just 1 or 2 sketches and then plan on immediately getting rid of them. Otherwise, you're going to find your model being rapidly cluttered up. I've rolled my model forward to the point where I've already added these 4 planes. As you can see here in the front view. Now I'm going to start building some sketches that will be used for this portion of the handle. The first thing I want to do is make a sketch of this line on the front plane. So I'll do that by starting my sketch. I'm going to copy this element from my layout sketch. And I actually need this spline to start here and end here. And I can do that by trying to drag these points around to my sketch planes, but a lot of times that gets a little unpredictable when you try to do that with splines. So instead what I'm going to do is copy this line and this line from my plane control sketch and use that to trim away the excess. So clicking here and converting entities, and here and converting entities. Let me hide all of my planes here, which are creating a little clutter. I'll turn these two into construction lines and now use those to trim away the excess. That gives me just the piece that I need for this boundary, which will be built here. Now let me hide some of my layout sketches so I can see exactly what I'm doing. Here's the sketch that I just made. That's going to form this edge of the boundary on the front plane. We need to add a profile going from this point up to this open edge of the bottle. Later on we're going to add another one down here. This profile will go onto this plane here, which I've just highlighted. So we will make a new sketch. And I can draw either a spline or a simple arc. I could just use a 3-point arc, go 1, 2, 3, make this end pierce this arc here, this end pierce the opening of the bottle. Looking at this from the top view, we'll add a construction line and make that tangent to the arc. I think I'll just leave that as an arc for now. I need to draw a similar profile down here. That's going to be on this lower right handle plane. So making a new sketch. Since I drew an arc up here, I guess I'll just do the same down here. So 1, 2, 3. Pierce to this end. Pierce to my opening. Again, looking at this from the top view, adding a construction line and making those tangent. I'll finish that sketch. Now I've got all the elements that I need to make this portion of the handle. Going to a surfaces boundary, select this curve, or rather this sketch, then I'll select the opening of my handle. And you see, because this edge is going all the way to here, it wants to make the boundary go all the way to this point. I'm not going to worry about that because as soon as I add direction 2, which will be this sketch and this sketch, it's going to automatically trim that back to those sketches. If I want to be super careful about it, I can always activate the trim by direction 1 and by direction 2, but it's not changing anything here. So let me just turn off the curvature comb so we can see that a little more clearly. Now, because I want to mirror this handle later on to the other side, I need to make sure that the setting along this edge is set to normal to profile. And there's the first surface for my handle. Now I'm going to build the handle surface on this side using a similar technique. And I need to copy this portion of the handle contour from my handle layout, so I will make that visible. I will make a new sketch on the front plane and just copy this arc right here. Now I'm going to draw some new contours on this upper left plane here and my lower left handle plane here. First I'm going to hide my handle layout, so all I see is this sketch here. Making a new sketch on this plane, we'll do the same thing where I think I will just select a 3-point arc, piercing to this arc here, piercing to this open edge here. Looking at this from the top view, making a construction line and making that tangent. And again, if you decide to do this as a spline, make sure that the handle for the spline at this end is going straight up and down. Now on our last plane that we created, we're going to make one more sketch. Again, going with a 3-point arc, pierce, pierce. Take a look at this from the top view. Make our construction line. Make those tangent. And we have all the elements we need now to make this boundary surface. Something that's interesting here is you recall that when we made this middle layout sketch, we actually made a sketch of where we thought that surface was going to go right here, and also where we thought this handle surface was going to be going right here. As it turns out, we didn't even use those at all. In fact, I can even hide this sketch because it's just getting in the way. So now we can make another boundary using this edge of the opening, these two new contours that we created, and this contour here. You can also hide this sketch here, which was used for making our handle planes. And going to surfaces, once again, boundary surface, select these two elements for direction 1. And again, it wants to make the boundary go all the way to here and all the way to here. Don't worry about that. And for direction 2, we select this sketch and this sketch. Now we see it's trimmed back to where we want it to go. And once again, on this edge, we want to make this normal to profile. And finish. So here we see our first two surfaces of the handle. Now we are going to build this lower surface of the handle, and if I turn on the handle layout again, we see that this surface is going to require 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edges. We know that we can't do that with a boundary, and we will have to use a fill surface. We also know that fill surface does not have a normal to profile option. So if we attach the fill surface to an edge here, we don't want to attach it to a sketch because we won't be able to control the fill surface where it meets our mirror plane. So we will use the trick of copying this portion of our handle layout sketch and extruding it normal to my mirror plane, which in this case, of course, is the front plane. So starting a new sketch on my front plane. I'm also going to turn on the sketch that controlled my planes for the handle because I can use that for doing some trimming. I'm going to copy this curve here, but I only need this portion here. So I will also copy this line from my plane control sketch, turn this into a construction line, and then trim away the portion that I don't want. Now I can extrude this surface. I want to go in this direction. And the distance doesn't matter too much. I'll just make that 10 millimeters for convenience. And now I have all the edges that I need to build this lower fill surface. So hiding my sketches, go to Fill Surface, click on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edges, and you notice that it does not want to make a fill surface. So what is the problem here? The problem is that this edge here should really begin here and end here so that we have one contiguous loop for the fill surface. But we know that this edge is actually wrapping all the way around to here. So how do we solve this problem? The answer is that I'm going to roll back before I made this extrusion here. And all I have to do is knit all these surfaces together that I currently have. So going to Knit Surface, I will just knit together these 3 surfaces. And now we see that this edge is beginning and ending where it needs to, and the same will happen for this edge as well. Now I can roll forward. Here's my extruded surface that will be used as an edge for my fill, and now I can successfully do the fill surface. Once again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we see that the fill surface is successful, and I need to do some controls here to make this shape properly. This edge at the mirror plane needs to be tangent. This edge where we join the actual handle surface wants to be curvature. This edge is going to be a sharp edge until we later add a fillet, so that should be left as contact. This edge here we are going to blend into, so we want to make this curvature. This edge is going to be a sharp edge along here, so we want to leave that as contact. And this edge we are going to blend back into this handle surface, and we will make this curvature as well. Finishing that, we see that this 6-sided fill surface has done a remarkable job of filling this in and matching up with all these different features, transitioning from a contact control to a curvature control and back to a contact control. If you can't get the curvature control to work properly at this edge, and this edge, you might have to resort to using tangent. Now we're ready to do the same thing for the upper portion of the handle. And turning my sketches back on, I need to make this piece of the handle in a new sketch. So on my front plane, going to Sketch, copying my handle layout again, this time copying this line from my plane control sketch, and making that a construction line, and then using my trim to get rid of this excess down here. And now extrude that sketch. And once again, I want it to go away from the bottle, and 10 millimeters is fine. Turning my sketches back off, I can now once again make a fill surface, 6 sides once again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Starting with our first edge here, we need this one to be tangent because it's on the mirror plane. The second edge here is going to be curvature. The third edge we leave as contact. The fourth edge we're blending into the step here, so we will make that curvature. The fifth edge is left as contact, and the sixth edge is set to curvature. There we have all of our handle surfaces. We have 2 surfaces that were just temporary for the purpose of making the fill surfaces. So now we can get rid of these. We'll just go up into the surface bodies. And the surfaces we want to get rid of are this Extrude 2, holding down my Control key, Extrude 3, right-click, Delete Bodies, and this adds a Delete Bodies feature to the feature tree. So we're all cleaned up there. And our next obvious step is to knit everything back together. So we have 3 surfaces to knit. And now we have a single surface body. The last thing I want to do for this video is add a fillet along this edge. That's supposed to be 2 to 3 millimeters in radius. If I choose fillet, set that to about 3 millimeters, and click on this edge, we see it highlights the edge, but it's not looking like it's actually going to put the fillet in for me. I can try clicking on all of the edges to try to force it to fillet. but nothing really seems to happen. If I hit the check mark, it comes back with an error. So I will X out of that, and the question is, why is this happening? The reason is that in this area here, we have the two surfaces meeting at something approaching a 90-degree angle, but as we get closer and closer to this area here, that meeting angle gets wider and wider and wider until these two surfaces are in alignment with each other because of the fact that we use the curvature control along this edge. That means the fillet doesn't want to go up into this area because usually you have to have an angle between two surfaces to make a fillet between them. Now I've experimented with changing the curvature control on this fill surface at this edge to contact and getting rid of the curvature control so that there would be an intentional angle between these two surfaces. But it seems like the curvature control is needed to help shape this portion of the fill surface. Without that control, this area gets a little bit strange. So what we are going to do here is a little trick that will allow that fillet to go in onto this edge. What we are going to do is trim back this surface to an area where the two surfaces meet at a slight angle so that we can put a fillet along this edge, and then we will patch in the hole that we created with the trim. Probably the easiest way to do this is simply make a sketch on our front plane and then just make a circle with its center here, and we'll do the same down at the bottom. And we'll make the circle about 5 millimeters in diameter. This is a little bit arbitrary. We'll make these two equal. And then we'll use the trim command. And I think what we will do is use the keep selections, and I'll just select the larger part of the bottle here. And that gets rid of a hole here and a hole down here. Now if we zoom in on this and tilt this a little bit, you can see that this edge, where it runs into the hole, is actually the two edges or surfaces are meeting at a slight angle. Also, this edge now ends in an open area, so there's no complication for the fillet trying to blend into another surface where it finishes. It can just end right here. So now I can add my fillet. We'll try about 3 millimeters again. Click on this edge, and now we see the fillet is successfully added. The only downside here is that the fillet looks very large down here, but because the surfaces open up to a very shallow angle here, the width of the fillet is very narrow. I've tried adding a face fillet here. It doesn't seem to want to work. Your other approach is to try to add a variable fillet and control the radius along the edge to try to get the width of that fillet to look a little more consistent all the way along its length. But we won't fiddle with that. We'll just finish this here. Now we have a surface with two holes in it, so we can patch that in with our fill surface. This is very easy. We'll just click here, 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 and here, 4 edges total. We will apply to all edges a curvature control, and that's giving me a little bit of a lump there, so I might want to go back and change all those curvatures to tangent. And that looks pretty good. Let me turn off the edges, and I'll turn on my real view graphics so we can see how this looks. And we can see a little bit of a lump here where it sort of fades out from this edge fillet into this zone here. Now another option is to trim out a different shaped opening. So rolling back again, turning my edges back on, and we'll turn real view back off. I'm going to again make a sketch on my front plane. And what I'm going to do is take this edge and just offset it about 1 millimeter. And I will go bidirectional. And I'll drag this off into here. And I will just add a tangent arc that connects these two ends together. I'm purposely going past this edge, and instead of using the trim, I'm going to split these surfaces and then delete them. That way I don't have to make the trim surface perfectly match this edge or this edge, which sometimes can create some problems when you're trying to do a trim that matches an already existing edge. So I'm going to go to split line, insert, curve, split line, and I'm going to split this surface, and this surface. Now going to my surfaces, I will delete face and select these three pieces. Now I have an opening that more emulates the direction of this edge as opposed to the circle that I had before, which was somewhat arbitrary as far as the shape of this edge was concerned. So what I'm hoping is that when I patch this in, and because it's very narrow on either side of the original edge, that will more faithfully follow the contours of this area and look a little better when it's blended in. So I will patch this in now with a fill surface, but before doing that I need to add that fillet to this edge. That was 3 millimeters. There's my fillet, and going to my filled surface, we will just select this perimeter of the opening, short little edge here, an edge here, a short one here also, and that finishes up the surface. Sometimes optimized surface can give an odd result. You might want to uncheck that. See, that smooths out the surface a little bit better. And I want to set all these edges to curvature if I can. Apply to all edges. And if I finish that, I see a bulge here, which reminds me that in fact these two edges here should just be set to contact, because I want an intentional sharp edge along here where later on I will add a fillet. So going back and editing that, those were the first two edges, so I want to make sure I first uncheck apply to all edges. We'll set edge 1 to contact and edge 2 to contact. Finish that up. Hide all of our edges and take a look at that. And that doesn't look too bad. We can see a little bit of a lump here. I don't know if it's any better or worse than the other approach. And if we go to our curvature here, we can see this sort of blending together. It blends a little bit funny, but it's probably no worse than the other method, and it might actually be a little bit better. In any event, for now, I think I'll just leave my circular patch down at the bottom and my elongated patch at the top. These need to be knitted back into the bottle. I deleted the knits that I temporarily did earlier just to look at the surface contours. Now I'm back to a single surface, and I only have one more step to do for this video, and that's to take this circular edge and add a fillet to it. If I just add a simple 2 millimeter fillet using constant radius and click on this edge, it should automatically go all the way around the edge. You see the problem here though, because the surfaces that meet at this edge are meeting at all kinds of different angles, and the result is that the width of this fillet changes as it's going around. That looks a little unsightly, so I will change this to a face fillet. For my first box, I will just select the outer surfaces of the bottle, and then for the other box, I will select these inner surfaces, which will include this, this, and this. And I need to get this portion of the handle, this lower fill surface, and I want to set this to constant width. Now you notice I'm not getting any preview for that fillet. The reason for this is the direction that the fillet is set in each of these boxes. You see both of these have arrows facing outward. This fillet needs to go to the inside of this surface and to the inside of this surface so that it's going to be curved this way. And right now it's trying to make a fillet that's going to the outside of the two surfaces. So I need to toggle the direction of these arrows. And you see it's flipped this arrow inward, And now I need to toggle my other arrow. Let's flip that arrow inward, and now you see that we get the preview for the fillet. So just finishing the fillet now, and taking a look at this from the front view, you see we have a nice looking fillet with a consistent width all around the circular perimeter. That concludes the construction of one half of the bottle and this video. In the following video, we will mirror this bottle over, complete the top and bottom, and the neck and the cap, which will give us a completed project.